Hello guys, how are you?
I'm Hardeep Singh. Welcome back to your own YouTube channel. IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test, and speaking, you got guesswork. Please, guys, participate in everyday listening and reading practice test to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Press the bell icon for the upcoming notifications. Don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams.
Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between a client and a flight centre agent about making changes to an airline booking. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Good morning, Mrs. Gray. This is Bert Stock speaking from Finnegan's Flight Centre. I can now confirm your flight to Singapore.
Oh, good. No problems, I hope.
No, everything is in order.
So we got the dates we wanted?
Yes, leaving from Hong Kong on the 25th of July and arriving in Singapore later the same day.
How long does the flight last?
Oh, about 3 hours 40 minutes.
So we'd get there at...
9:45.
in the evening?
No, 9:45 a.m.
But that means we'd be leaving at...
Your flight leaves Hong Kong at 6:05 a.m.
So we'd have to check in an hour before that?
Mrs. Gray, check-in closes 60 minutes before your scheduled departure. If you arrive after check-in has closed, you will not be able to board the flight, and you may forfeit your entire fare. I would strongly recommend that you arrive at the check-in counter at least 120 minutes before your departure time.
So you're saying we should be at the airport no later than 4:05 a.m.?
That's correct.
But we'd have to get up in the middle of the night to arrive by that time. Can't we get a later flight?
Not on July 25th. Now, there is a later flight on certain weekdays, but not at the weekend.
Well, we must go with what we've got then, because we're not at all flexible on the dates because of work commitments.
Can I confirm that you want to return on August 7th?
Yes, that's the idea.
Flight VQ239 will depart from Singapore at 9:20 a.m. on August 7th.
Oh, that's a much more civilized time. Tell me, the time zone is the same, isn't it? We don't gain or lose an hour along the way.
There's no change in the time zone, so you can expect to be back at around 1 p.m. Does that suit you?
Oh, absolutely. I'll have time to unpack before dinner. We're expecting to meet friends at the new seafood restaurant at 8 o'clock.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Mrs. Gray, I'll send you all these details by an email or letter of confirmation. Which do you prefer?
Well, email is faster, but we've been having difficulties with our internet connection. So, if you could post it out, I'd appreciate that.
Now, just one or two other things to check before final confirmation. You're booked on a Lifelight ticket.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, you'll only have carry-on baggage. Is that right?
Oh, yes, that was the original idea. It's so much quicker not having to wait around at the luggage carousel, but...
Yes?
Can you remind me of the allowance again?
With a Lifelight ticket, you're allowed 10 kilos of hand baggage.
I'm not sure that's such a good idea now.
Oh?
Well, apparently we're going to have to attend quite a few formal functions while we're away, so I think I'm going to need a real suitcase to fit the extra clothes and shoes in.
Well, that's not a problem. I can upgrade you to the next level and change your ticket to Easy Flight. There will be an extra charge, of course.
How much?
$30 per checked-in item of luggage, weighing no more than 22 kilos per item.
Well, we'll probably manage with just a single suitcase between the two of us. Is it possible to do it like that?
Yes, of course. You can take the Easy Flight option, and your husband can stay with the Light Flight ticket.
Great.
I'll give you your reservation number now, so if you need to make any further changes or inquiries, you can just quote this reference, okay?
Yes, I have a pen and paper. What is it?
L4G BWF.
L4G BUF?
WF.
Thanks, I've got it now.
At this point, I can actually book your seat numbers. Do you have any preference? Window or aisle?
Oh, not by the window, Bert. You see, I'm quite a nervous flyer, and I don't like looking out. What's more, my husband likes a bit of room to stretch his legs. Aisle would be good.
Great. That's sorted then. As I said, I'll send you the details, and if you need to talk to the agency again, just quote that reference number I gave you.
Thanks so much. Bye.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
You will hear a crime prevention and fire safety officer talking to a group of new residents. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
Good evening. Last week, Mr. Jenkins spoke to you about home security. My name is Malcolm Fletcher, and tonight I'm going to talk about personal safety when driving and fire safety in the home. Of course, we shouldn't go around perpetually frightened of all the bad things that might happen to us, but there are some sensible precautions that we should all take to avoid getting hurt. You probably know already that a great number of serious assaults occur in the vicinity of motor vehicles. You should always be alert when walking to your car and check the rear seat of your car before getting in. This is especially important in isolated parking areas or the far corners of major shopping complexes. Now, once inside your car, get into the habit of locking the doors. Always keep the windows up and the doors locked, especially if you're travelling alone. If at all possible, steer clear of isolated roads after dark. Even with all the high-tech communication devices we have today, many serious crimes are committed on lonely back roads. Make sure your vehicle is mechanically sound, and ensure you have adequate fuel in the tank at all times. If your vehicle does break down in a lonely spot, lift the bonnet and then lock yourself inside the car and call for help on your mobile phone. Never, under any circumstances, leave your vehicle and go with a stranger to seek help. It is better to wait for the police or some other emergency vehicle to stop and offer assistance. Of course, you should never pick up a hitchhiker. Some of the most serious crimes committed in this country have been a direct result of this foolish practice. If you think you're being followed by someone in another vehicle, ideally you should drive to the nearest police station. But if there isn't one within easy reach, drive to the nearest open service station or shop, or the nearest occupied house. Now, we are lucky enough to have a police station in this area. Do any of you know where it is? Look at this map on the screen, and I'll show you how to get to it from the community centre where you are now. Then, when you get home, you can work out how to get there from other directions. From the community centre, go along Bayview Street toward Maiden Avenue. At the roundabout, take the second exit onto Lee Street. Go past the medical clinic, and at the next roundabout, take the first exit onto Moore Street. You should continue on Moore Street until you have passed the little block of shops on the left and the church on the right. Stay on Moore Street until you go over the bridge, and then turn right into Canal Street. You'll find the police station on the corner of Canal Street and Cockleshell Court.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20.
Now let's move on to fire safety. Before I talk to you about safety precautions and procedures, I'd like to mention some of the effects of smoke and heat on humans. There are 4 ingredients of fire, namely oxygen, fuel, heat, and chain reactions. Almost all materials burn, and most household goods burn very easily. The air we breathe contains about 21% oxygen. As fire burns, it consumes oxygen, thereby reducing the oxygen content of the air. When that is reduced to 15%, oxygen deficiencies in body tissue cause an impairment of muscle control and dexterity. At between 10 and 14%, judgment and reasoning are affected. Oxygen reduction to between 6 and 10% results in unconsciousness, and breathing stops. Sounds scary, doesn't it? But that's not all you have to worry about. Many materials in the home give off toxic gases as they burn. The main toxic gases are carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and nitrogen oxide. Carbon monoxide is an invisible and odourless gas produced in all fires. It takes up the place of oxygen in the blood, thereby reducing the supply of oxygen to the brain. The effect of carbon dioxide is to increase the heart rate and stimulate the rate of breathing, causing an increase in the intake of other toxic gases, which contributes to, amongst other symptoms, serious oxygen deprivation. Hydrogen sulfide, on the other hand, affects the nervous system, causing dizziness and pain in the respiratory system. It does occur naturally in volcanic gases and hot springs, and it also results from the bacterial breakdown of organic matter. You're probably familiar with it. You know, it has that characteristic odour of rotten eggs. But make no mistake, in large concentrations, it's deadly. Lastly, nitrogen oxide is another extremely poisonous gas at high levels of concentration, which deadens feeling in the throat and lungs, causes swelling in the throat, and a build-up of fluids in the lungs.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
You will hear a conversation between a tutor and a student about dissertation research. You have 30 seconds to look at questions 21 to 30.
Hi, Agnieszka. Have a seat.
Hi, thank you.
So I take it you've finished your interviews for your dissertation?
I have, yes.
And have you had a chance to analyse the data yet?
Oh, yes, I've prepared a graph as well.
Excellent. Let's have a look. Wow, that's quite comprehensive. Well done. OK, can you talk me through it a bit?
Sure. So, like we discussed in our previous meeting, I decided to focus on just 2 nationalities rather than simply questioning everyone. It made it a bit more difficult to find enough participants, but I'm glad I took your advice because it was much easier to identify patterns in the responses. I did consider briefly going for 3 nationalities, 1 from continental Europe, 1 from Britain, and 1 from further afield, but I don't think 1 European country would be representative of the whole continent, so I decided against it.
I'm glad you did. Remember, the narrower the scope, the clearer the results.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Did you go for Polish and English then?
I did, yes. I created a survey and passed it around to a couple of friends of mine, 1 from the UK and 1 studying at a university in Poland. I also got in touch with the Polish community in the area and asked my friends and acquaintances to pass the survey around to their parents because I wanted to get answers from as many age groups as possible.
Oh, very good. Did you use the internet to find people as well?
I did. I posted the survey on my social media and on forums and pages for Polish immigrants in London.
So what was the response rate?
It was actually quite good, much higher than I'd anticipated. I got about 200 responses from UK citizens and around 250 from Polish people in the 18 to 25 age group. Then about 150 each from both nationalities in the 25 to 40 group and around 200 in total in the 41 and over group.
Well, that's quite impressive. So what did you find out? Well,
unsurprisingly, the majority of respondents under 26 from both countries were far more positive about immigration. 45% of young Polish people and 59% of young British people said that immigration had a positive effect on London. Another 32% and 26% respectively said the effect was neutral. And only 23% of Poles and 15% of Britons said immigration was a bad thing for the city.
What about the other 2 groups?
The findings in the 25 to 40 age group were very similar, but the 41 and over group were massively different. Only 28% of Poles and 31% of Britons said immigration was a positive thing, and a huge 35% and 38% said it was bad.
Did you think about splitting the group into smaller categories? For example, 40 to 55 and then 56 and over?
I did think about it, but the thing is that I asked people to write their exact age as well as ticking the age group category just to be able to check if there'd be differences between those closer to 40 and those much, much older. But I didn't find any notable ones, so I don't think splitting them would have made a difference.
OK.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions.
And what were the reasons people gave, generally?
Well, unsurprisingly, the main thing younger people mentioned was that London is culturally enriched by immigrants who bring their customs and their cuisine and their language with them. And this has contributed, in their opinion, to making London the world city it is today. People from other age groups agreed with this, but the problem they had with immigration was the perception that people arriving to the UK are often resistant to change and might not be willing to adapt to the existing customs, which they felt defined their nationality. Oh, unemployment was also a major concern for many, as well as the perceived rise in crime in certain areas.
OK. Anything else?
Yeah, some people also mentioned that the city is getting overcrowded and that's having an effect on housing, but not many of them thought it would be much better if there was less immigration.
And any other positives?
Well, Actually, there was something quite surprising in the 25 to 40 age group. About 20% said one of the things they loved about immigration in London was the fact that it contributed to creating so many new romantic relationships between Britons and foreigners.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah, and of course many of them also mentioned that the British economy has thrived thanks to the constant stream of skilled tax-paying immigrants.
Of course. Anything else?
There were quite a few more things, but I think those are the main ones. I have to say there were some very interesting personal stories that people contributed anonymously, both in the online and the paper survey. I had a section at the end where I asked people to write any positive or negative experiences they've had with immigrants, or because they themselves were immigrants, and I've got a bank of fascinating examples.
Great. Are you planning to reference any of these in your presentation?
Yeah, I've picked a couple of positive and a couple of negative experiences from each nationality. There are plenty more, but I'll add these to my dissertation because it would take too long to read more than 4.
All right then, let's have a look.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You will hear a lecture about the characteristics of left-handed people. You have 30 seconds to look at questions 31 to 40.
Being left-handed was once seen as a sign of the devil, who was said to baptize his followers with his left hand. It was also thought to be a sign of witchcraft. Joan of Arc, who was famously burnt at the stake, was often depicted as left-handed in art. As a result, parents in previous centuries often tied their left-handed children's hands behind their backs and forced them to learn how to write with their right hand, leading, we know now, not only to bad handwriting, but also to poor concentration, unruly behavior, shyness, bad memory, and reading difficulties, as well as fatigue and neuroticism. But what do we actually know about left-handedness? For a phenomenon that has existed since the early days of humanity, and even further back, surprisingly little. We know that we have been predominantly right-handed for at least 500,000 years, at least according to research conducted by the University of Kansas. And we know that, contrary to popular opinion, being left-handed doesn't necessarily mean being right-brained. In fact, while 95% of right-handed people use their left half of their brain more, up to 70% of left-handed people actually do the same. We also know that there's a long list of advantages and disadvantages associated with being a lefty. By the way, that's spelt with a Y at the end, not an IE, as left-handed people are often called. Let's start with the advantages, shall we? It might surprise you to hear that most of these advantages have to do with the fact that left-handed people grow up in a world that overwhelmingly favors and expects right-handedness. Take sport, for example. Left-handed people are more likely to excel in sports with one opponent, but this is not generally due to a naturally higher sporting ability. It has more to do with how often they get to practice against their opponents. Living in a right-handed world, left-handed people get a chance to play against right-handed people far more often, thus growing more adept at anticipating a right-handed opponent's moves than a right-handed person might with a left-handed opponent, as there are so few left-handed opponents out there. Similarly, left-handed people recover from illnesses more quickly than right-handed people, but, once again, this isn't some innate characteristic they're born with. Scientists believe it's because left-handed people often need to strengthen both sides of their brain in order to thrive in our right-handed world. While a right-handed person does not have to struggle to use a pair of scissors or drive in most countries, for example, a left-handed person will need to take that one extra step in order to teach their left hand to mirror the movements of a right hand. Then, of course, there are those advantages which I personally do not find as strong or empirically proven, such as the idea that left-handed people tend to become presidents more often, or that they are more creative. It has indeed been proven that left-handed people are better at divergent thinking, but this just means that they're better able to examine a situation from all points of view rather than that they possess more creativity. At any rate, as Professor Ronald Yeo suggests, it's incredibly hard to measure something like creativity. And there are, unfortunately, plenty of disadvantages linked to left-handedness as well. As I mentioned before, driving is one. The UK is a notable exception here, as left-handed people tend to pass their driving exams more easily than right-handed people because the gear stick and the lever are both on the left-hand side in UK cars. Unfortunately, most Western countries drive on the right, which puts left-handed drivers at a disadvantage. Moreover, an Australian study from 2009 found that left-handed children were more likely to have issues in reading and writing, but also in their motor skills and the way they develop socially. Most children, the researchers said, catch up with their right-handed classmates as they get older, but that's not always the case. Then there's the 2013 study, which was conducted at Yale University, and which discovered that left-handed people are more likely to suffer from schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders, as well as the score of studies suggesting a link between left-handedness and dyslexia, ADHD, PTSD, etc. But, as I said before, it's not all bad for left-handed people. Setting aside the advantages and disadvantages, what most researchers now agree on is that whether you're left-handed or right-handed doesn't really affect you that much at the end of the day. Sure, you will often be met with curiosity and have to answer the pointless question of, are you left-handed, when somebody sees you using your left hand to write. And you might get your left hand as well as your writing smudged if you decide to use a fountain pen. But overall, the differences between left-handedness and right-handedness are so subtle and so insignificant that they are not enough to create two distinctive categories of people. It does, however, accentuate the fact that humans are varied and diverse for reasons we often misunderstand.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
So guys, don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page. IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test and speaking, you get guesswork. Please guys, participate in everyday new IELTS listening and reading practice tests to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. For more IELTS material, visit my official website www.ieltsupdatesandrecentexams.com. The link is given below in the description. If you need PDF files of latest IELTS material, then please join my Telegram channel. So guys, please write your score below the comment section. Again, thanks for listening. God bless you all guys. Stay tuned, stay safe.